All right, folks, we're going to have a talk today about the GATE program, the gateway process, military psyops, and something God told me about ancient gates. At the end, I'll pray with you guys if that's something you want. So, first, about a year ago, God had me start praying a prayer, and I wasn't sure what it meant at first. But just recently it started really becoming clear. And so I want to talk about that. A few weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago now, I saw a video on the GATE program, the Gifted and Talented Education Program. And when I saw that, I was pretty interested in it. I started listening to it and realized just how big this thing that God had me been praying was. And I really want to explore how the GATE program and the gateway process and military psyops are all tied together. So first, the Gifted and Talented Education Program, as far as I can tell, it started in the late 70s. I was screened by a school psychologist or a psychiatrist, I don't remember exactly, but I was screened in 1981 or 82 in 7th grade to, originally they said it was because I was failing my classes, but I look back now and I think they probably had some other way of picking me out of the class. And a lot of people that have talked about being in the GATE program have talked about they weren't sure why they were picked out of class. Some were failing, some of them did show exceptional talent, but it seemed to be somewhat random. I have a theory about that we'll talk about either later in this video or in some other video. But it was supposed to be a program about accelerated learning, advanced curriculum, etc. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting when I was watching this video that I saw about the GATE program, I thought it was really interesting that they were talking about Zener cards and being able to kind of remote view or telepathically tell what was in a folder or on a piece of paper or with the Zener cards. And that gave me my first kind of clue into what I think is really going on with the GATE program and how that ties into the gateway process and military psyops and overall how that ties into spirituality. So a lot of people have been talking about the GATE program lately because some people had repressed memories of it and they saw some videos, kind of like me. I don't think I was ever actually in GATE. I think I was screened for it, and because I was a little rebellious, I think that they skipped over me, that they decided not to put me into the GATE program. Although I don't have a huge memory of my childhood. I do remember the pink drink that everybody talks about. Well, I remember the pink tablets. I feel like I remember taking the pink drink at some point, but I definitely remember taking the pink tablets. And I think that was given to all of our class. I don't remember exactly. I do remember that the person that tested me took me to a small room and had me, go through a different series of tests. And I remember one of the things she said was that I had number sequence, like I was able to remember a number sequence longer than any person that she had ever tested on number sequences. And when they were done with that testing, they said I was just short of genius IQ. I think less than 20 points short of genius. They said I was gifted. So that was how I tested out. And they had talked about putting me in advanced studies class, but they wanted me to bring up all my grades, and I wasn't willing to do that. because I was bored in school. I was completely bored. But that's some of my experience in school, and I feel like it was a screening for the GATE program. Some of the other things that people remember in GATE was hearing the sounds and it being like they thought it was a hearing test. But if you look actually into Monroe's Institute's gateway process, that started out with sounds and watching a screen. And so a lot of people remember that sound and remember seeing that screen. And the Monroe or the gateway process that Monroe Institute built actually uses binaural beats and altered states of consciousness to have you do some things. The CIA studied it for astral projection and for remote viewing. I want to show you some of what the CIA talked about in their paper, or actually it was the U.S. Army psyops division that studied it for their purposes. So let me look at that real quick. So as you can see, the gateway process was developed, at least in part, to do some things like remote viewing and astral projecting. And they say it was to balance out your mind, to get both of your hemispheres of your brain balanced out. But I think what they were really doing is opening up gateways in the spirit realm. I wanted to show you what the gateway process was doing. The Department of the Army, U.S. Intelligence Security Command out of Fort Meade was very interested in this. And we know who did this report, but we don't know who it was for. But I want to show you something down here. You can read this. It's very, very interesting. But this was the gateway process. And what they were trying to figure out was the gateway process useful for the U.S. Army PSYOP division? I'm going to scroll all the way down here to the bottom to their conclusions. And I want to show you a couple of things in the conclusions. One, they talk about what the process is that you would need to go through in order to get the remote viewing or the level of consciousness that is needed to do the PSYOPs missions. Their conclusion was that you could use the gateway process to experience an accelerated altered consciousness. But let me show you some of the warnings they gave in here so you understand why you need to be careful about what gates you go through, what portals you enter. So here in their list of findings, they tell you to approach Focus 15 and 21 objectives to escape from time space and interact with new dimensions from an out-of-body perspective. Then down in J, they tell you be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent, non-corporal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded. If you're a Christian, you know that an intelligent or seemingly intelligent non-corporal energy form is a demon. And they're telling you you're going to encounter these when you go into this level of consciousness. They also tell you to arrange to have groups of people in a heightened state, it says focus 12, but a heightened state of consciousness, unite their altered consciousness to build holographic patterns around sensitive areas to repulse possible unwanted out-of-body presences. Now, an out-of-body presence or a presence, a spirit without a body, is called a demon. So it's not really something you want to be messing around with. And as far as I can tell, from reports that I've heard, people that were in the GATE program, also many of those people as children participated in the gateway process. And that is the big reveal that God started showing me. And what God had me do when he had me pray, he had me pray to take myself out of all ancient gates. And again, at first, I didn't understand what he was talking about. We're going to go over what gates are spiritually here in a minute, right after we talk about military psyops and consciousness experiments. So, Michael Aquino, this guy right here, was part of the U.S. military's psyop division. And he was a known Satanist. He ran a temple called the Temple of Set. And you should look him up. He's an interesting character. He had been involved with Anton LaVey, and they got into a doctrinal difference or doctrinal spat, difference of opinion. And Michael Aquino decided that he wanted to worship this Egyptian god Set. And by the way, with the people that had gone through the GATE program, look how much, if you study it, just be aware of how much Egyptian artifacts show up in, Egyptian themes show up in what they talk about, pyramids, and so on. So Michael Aquino wrote a book called Mind Wars. And he wrote that, by the way, with a guy named Paul Vallely. You should look into him. He is active in U.S. politics right now and in some organizations that you wouldn't expect someone that was partners or wrote a book with a former Satanist, or a Satanist formerly wrote a book with a Satanist, would be involved in. So look up where Paul Vallely is and what he's been doing. But Mind Wars is all about psychological warfare. It's about shaping thought, but it also, the psychological operations of the military and the CIA have gone into things like remote viewing and astral projecting and some of that. And so when you bring this all together, it looks like to me that the GATE program looked for young, talented, neurodivergent kids that thought differently and or were spiritually gifted or gifted to be able to see into a different realm. It looks like it identified those kids and separated them out for some kind of training or testing. The ones that didn't go along with the program, like the ones that didn't want to drink the pink drink or the ones that didn't want to follow authority, those kids seemed to be either thrown out of the program or put on a different track. The ones that followed authority and did well seem to have gone on to careers of importance, as the world would say. They went on to be in the military themselves, or CIA, or news media, or actors, or famous in some way or another. And I think, well, here's what God showed me. God told me to take myself out of all ancient gates, to pray that I be removed from all ancient gates. And so I prayed that prayer. Lord, I remove myself from all ancient gates. From every gate that you did not open for me or put me in, I remove myself from it. I remove my ancestors from it. I remove my name. My name cannot be spoken in ancient gates. And that is a prayer I prayed. And since I prayed that, many things have started shifting in my life. Places where I was really struggling before, where I had family that was struggling before, those things have shifted now. And I'll talk more about those in future videos, but just know that. So here's some of the things that God showed me about gates and what gates mean. And the Spirit. So one, in the Bible, gates were the center of justice. There were legal cases were tried. There were where contracts were signed. Decisions were made in the gates. And decisions were made by elders who sat in the gates. So think of that as a modern courtroom today. The other thing was they were a seat of authority. If you sat in the gates, you were in a position of authority. And so it signified control over who came and went. It signified control over the city's life and commerce. The third thing is it is a spiritual access point. I've got on this infographic a cosmic point of control, but let's use the word spiritual point of control. The Lord talked about gates of righteousness and the gates of hell in the Bible. And we might get into a Bible study about gates later on. But right now, I just want you to understand that gates are more than just a physical thing on a fence or to a city or whatever. They actually have spiritual representation. So when God told me to pray and take myself out of all ancient gates, he was telling me to take myself out of all these spiritual places where my ancestors or I had put myself in places that, or the enemy had placed me in places that I wasn't supposed to be spiritually. The temple gates were where people were separated out. The priests could go inside the inner court, but they couldn't go inside the Holy of Holies unless they were the high priest. So gates had a real physical meaning in the temple, but that physical meaning was reflective of the gates in heaven, or spiritual gates in the spirit realm. So I just want y'all to understand that gates, and you can read, when you hear gates, think portal, think door, think access point. The gates mean a lot more than what most of us believe. The enemy is a planner, and he is after us. And so where we can't make sense of certain things, like where there's been delay, where there's been heartache, where there's been financial disaster, where there's been relationship disaster, where there's been challenges that don't seem to naturally make sense, are in part due to us opening up gates or being in gates or portals or doors or whatever you want to call it that we're not supposed to be in, because there's judgment in the gates. There's commerce in the gates. The gates are where you make decisions. The gates are entryways into other realms. And so I think that is why God had me pray to be taken out of the ancient gates. And remember, Jesus said, the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church. I think that means a lot more than we've considered in the past. I'll talk about that in a future video. Until then, I want to pray for you real quick. Lord, I ask that you take every person within the sound of my voice out of ancient gates that you did not put them in. Lord, I ask that their name not be able to be spoken by the enemy in the ancient gates. Lord, I ask that you remove their DNA from ancient gates where there was judgment, Lord, and they've requested forgiveness, they've repented, they've asked for forgiveness for their forefathers and the iniquity of their forefathers. Lord, I ask that be canceled in the ancient gates. Father, we just thank you in the name of your Son, Jesus, and we thank you that Jesus is our counsel in the courts of heaven and that his blood testifies for us. In Jesus' precious name, amen. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.